Barry Ritholtz here at Ritholtz Wealth Management. I have Dina Isola, one of our star client-facing advisors, who basically just went down to Washington, D.C., and pretty much taught Congress a little bit about 403Bs and what's kind of crazy about the retirement systems for teachers. What was that like, Dina?
I'd like to say I educated them, but I had the distinct feeling that not many people were really listening. I was there to discuss Reg BI, and I...
Explain what Reg BI is.
Sure.
Define your terms.
Sure. Reg Best Interest is what they're looking to put in place to protect investors. Mm-hmm. And it's basically trying to explain to investors who their representative is working for and what kind of disclosures they would have to give.
So you're down in, look, this is democracy in action.
Yes.
You were invited to testify because of your expertise in the space, and you got to actually take some of these Congress critters to school. What was the most surprising thing about the experience?
I think the most surprising thing was that people had their minds made up. I was hoping that there was going to be some sort of thoughtful discussion and maybe illuminating them to things that they weren't aware of. But it seemed to me that people were very much entrenched in their camp. They really only wanted to focus on that side. If you said anything that basically turned what they were saying on its head, they would shut the conversation down.
Is this rule better than no rule? Let's go down.
I think if you adopt a lowest common denominator standard, that's what you're going to get. And
Yeah, it's clearly not the rule you want.
They were suddenly out of time. They would yield back their time, or they would stop speaking to you because you cannot speak unless you're spoken to.
Wait. Repeat that again. You can, what do you mean you can't? So you're presenting, they ask you a question, and then when they say, I yield the time back to whoever, you don't get to say, let me finish so you understand
Yes.
the context of this and some of the nuances of this sophisticated.
Correct.
That doesn't happen.
So, for example, I was asked about fees and about minimums and how the fiduciary rule was going to make smaller investors not get good advice because who's going to want to take a small account? And my point was that at Ritholtz, we have the 403B section and we do not have account minimums for teachers and we have very low fees. It's 0.62. And as soon as I said that, it was like, a gate came down because
I yield back to the chairman.
Exactly, and that's it.
My time's expired. I yield back.
Sorry. You can't speak. So you have to be. You really have to sit there and take it, and
Right.
you can't really stand up and say, "Wait a minute," or what you just said is garbage. And it was difficult. It was more difficult than I thought.
People don't like being told they're full of crap, do they?
No, and it was really clear to me. I had gone through in my testimony talking about conflicts of interest that I saw in the industry way back in the brokerage world, the quotas and the trips and the incentives. And clearly, there are a lot of people in Congress that are getting incentives themselves in the way of whatever a lobbyist is offering them.
Wait a second. You don't mean to say that congresspeople and the way campaign finance is done, they may be interested parties who don't care about the best interest of the public, but are doing and saying certain things
Yes.
because it helps their own election campaign?
They are more conflicted, I would venture to guess, because
Who's more conflicted? I'll ask you a question. I know they asked you questions you couldn't answer.
Sure.
But let me ask you this question. Who's more conflicted? A suitability standard-based broker or an elected congressperson?
Oh, definitely the congressperson.
Really?
Because here's the thing. The suitability broker has their allegiance to their employer, right? Now, we employ the people that are in Congress. We are paying their salaries and their benefits and their pensions and their really great health care.
Right. Which they don't
have.
want to extend to everybody.
Right. And their great thrift savings plan, which
Right.
I mentioned, which
Again,
also got
they
shut
don't want
down.
to save to send to everybody.
The thrift savings plan
Yes.
that you all are privileged to have.
I'm not asking you to.
That would be-
I got
that
Donald
would be
Trump
in a
as
perfect
president of the
world.
United States and in control of the executive branch of government. The choices are pretty much this rule or no rule. For now, I look forward to better choices in the future.
That's a horrible choice. I abstain.
I'm not sure that you
Abstain.
think
That's
we have a
horrible
great
choice.
president. Okay, so it's a horrible choice.
It's a
You
horrible
can't make a
choice.
decision. Ms.
Both
John.
don't do the job.
So You mentioned the fiduciary rule and you mentioned best interest. Let's explain that in a little more detail. Here at our firm, at the RIA, I'm going to say that again. Our firm is a registered investment advisory, and we follow the fiduciary rule. If you're at a broker-dealer, you follow the suitability standard,
Correct.
which is, I'm fond of describing that as, don't sell Pinterest IPO stock to grandma. Maybe that's a slight exaggeration.
Right.
Now, along comes this new thing, the best interest, which sounds like a fiduciary standard, the Reg BI, but it really isn't. What is that?
So, and here's the danger of, I think, Reg BI is that it never defines what best interest means. So here you have a bunch of lawyers drafting the policy, and they don't want to define the very term that they're saying it's going to represent.
Do you think that's an oversight?
Absolutely.
Or was that done on purpose to leave
Absolutely.
it ambiguous?
Oh, very ambiguous. They can still, a salesperson can still recommend product that's more expensive, that's not necessarily the best product. They
So
can
best interest of who? The salesperson?
Right, and that's my point. So if they can still participate in contests and quotas, that's their motivation, the product. The investor is not at the center of the decision.
What are these contests you talk about? I'm not familiar with
Gosh, really? So
I've heard rumors.
Oh,
but
they're big. They're really, really
Are
big.
they?
Oh, of course they are. We're at a firm that I used to work at back in the late
day?
80s. The top producing brokers would go to places like Monte Carlo and
Get out.
And here's the thing: at the end of the month, everyone would be calling the line to see where they stood,
Right.
Where their standings were, and what funds would pay them more, and what business would hit that month, because not all funds would clear, in the same month.
So the best interest was what had the highest vig to the
Absolutely.
salesperson, would settle within the commission month.
Correct.
And I don't hear anything about what's good for the investor under any of those things.
And you won't. It was really what was good for the firm. To further that, the firm had its own mutual funds, like many firms do.
So-
And those funds were most profitable to the firm because they collected for being the investment manager as well as for custodying the assets and for transacting. So there was this pressure put on the brokers and the sales managers to push those products. 75%, they wanted 75% of all fund sales to come from the in-house, even though there were only a handful of in-house funds that were really good.
Right.
If you have the whole universe of mutual funds to choose from, you're not really going to pick from one fund family, chances are.
Reg BI sounds terrible.
It is.
Why were these guys defending it?
I think it's in their best interest to defend it, and I'll leave it at that.
Why? Now, we know the big Wall Street firms
Sure.
are pro Reg BI, and some of the big insurance companies are supporting it. So is the implication that these congresspeople perhaps might be soliciting for campaign
I
donations?
can think of no other reasonable reason why someone would defend it. I literally was waiting for somebody to try and convince me that smoking was good for your health. Like, that's how preposterous these arguments were that they were raising, and it just defied any kind of logic. I mean, just the morning that we were going to Washington, my 16-year-old son said to me, what is this that you're talking about? And I explained to him the difference between fiduciary and best interest and suitability, rather. And I was explaining where I stand on that. And he said, well, of course. They'll see it your way. And I thought,
the
wow,
naivety of children.
Yeah,
How
I said, you know what? It makes sense to my 16-year-old son, but a room full of educated people, it wasn't
So last
resonating.
two questions.
Sure.
You were given the option of saying either Reg BI or nothing at all, and you decided not to answer that question.
Is it
No.
better than nothing?
No,
I
it's
live,
not. In a perfect world, I'd want your thrift savings plan. Yeah, by that point, I was really furious, and I wasn't trying to make a soundbite. I really wasn't. It was just like a visceral, quick reaction. I felt like I was being baited.
You were.
Yes, and it was, okay, are you going to be reasonable and accept some sort of standard, or are you going to be unreasonable and it's your way or the highway? And I felt that if you accept that what that standard was, you were opening the door to this lowest common denominator, BS kind of regulation, and if you did nothing at all, that's not good either, but that's
You
why
were
I
given a
abstained.
Hobson's choice, which looks like a choice,
Right.
but really isn't.
Right.
It's worse, it's bad or worse are the only choices, and that's no
I
choice
believe
at all.
it's what you would call chewing glass or drinking battery acid. Yes, so that's kind of where I was, and I didn't appreciate being manipulated like that. He was steering me to make a choice because it was convenient for him to have me make that choice, to
So-
make his point.
So what didn't come up at the hearing that you wish someone would have brought up?
You know, when I raised the fact that we had no minimums for teachers and low fees, no one thought to say, wow, tell us more about that. Can other firms do that? Or how would you suggest that smaller investors invest if they can't have access to advice at an affordable price? There's lots of different, business models out there. When Tony and I had our own firm, we had no minimums.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we charge low fees. So there really is no argument. People can go to Vanguard. It's a perfectly great, option.
Any of the robo-advisors are fine
Exactly.
as well.
Robo was seen as like the devil.
Because you don't have an account size that's enough to ensure that those people will continue to give you advice. You'll be pushed to robo-advisors.
It
Why?
was just like hocus pocus. I don't know.
Yeah, this
They don't
software stuff, it's the work of Beelzebub.
Here's the thing: either they don't understand it,
Right.
or they want to demonize it. And either option doesn't serve investors well, because they should get educated on it and see that I would rather invest with a robo-advisor that's unconflicted, right? That's using the same software that many advisors use
Right.
to pair you with the appropriate risk level, correct?
Mm-hmm.
I would rather that than some guy who's trying to win a trip to Maui.
It's hard to get a person to understand something
Yes.
when their salary depends on them not understanding it.
Right.
To paraphrase Sinclair.
But their salary
Upton
really,
Sinclair.
but their salary should depend upon their constituents and protecting those investors. They are the first line of, defense. And one of the last things I said was, look, if you are not part of the solution, you are a large part of the problem. And I hope
love
that
that.
you have the courage to do what is needed. And
Dina Isola 2020.
and I got my answer, which was, a big middle finger as far as
So-
I'm concerned.
So if you got tagged again to go back and testify, would you go down? Do you think it's your civic duty, or is it a colossal waste of frustrating time? Or both?
It is frustrating. I have to say, I thought about this more, if you can imagine, after I came back
Sure.
than before. And trust me, I thought about it a lot before. I'm surprised my husband didn't divorce me in the week leading up. But I do think I would, just because I feel like screaming it from the rooftops, and hopefully somebody will hear. Like Katie Porter from
was
California. She was awesome. So was
She's fantastic.
Carolyn Maloney from New York. Excellent. They were there to really protect the investors, and we need more people to stand up.
And if people want to see the full testimony of your appearance, we put it on YouTube. It's at the compound. It's at my blog. There are multiple versions of this. I strongly recommend go out, watch Dina's full testimony. It's amazing.
And if your congressman or woman was not there to ask good questions, maybe ask them why they didn't sit in, because we could have used more people who really did want to hear what was going on and wanted to solve this than, tout some party line.
It sounded... I watched your testimony. I thought you did great,
Thank you.
and I think you did a public service. Thank you so much, Dina Isola.
Thank you.